Look, we take investments in a lot of companies. Like you said, most of them are on the left hand side of that diagram that you showed a minute ago. Some of them are more on the production end. This is one that's definitely on the left end, and it's a very interesting story that's really emerged just in the past. I think they started trading early December, something like that. So it's a project that was in a private company for many, many years, literally sitting right next door to a multi-million ounce deposit. The geology, everything tells us the deposit next door should extend onto this property. Talk more about that in a minute. Before I begin, though, I'm going to make a couple of comments that kind of segue from what you were saying. Look, one of the things about this cycle in particular, I think we're going to see is the emergence of a new generation of gold producers. Okay, it's not just about the existing producers that we see out there. You know, Newmont, look, great company. I work for them, and I think they'll do very well. But you know, there are new emerging gold producers coming around, and that includes a company called Equinox, for example. It's Ross Beaty's kind of gold vehicle, if you will, gold production vehicle. And they seem to be making aggressive moves. They've taken out a Premier here very recently, and that is going to catalyze, you know, growth at a different level. Okay, so you're starting to see mid-tier gold producers become more aggressive and starting to acquire. They have the same issue around supply cliff that anybody does, but in this case, you know, that competition might be at that level. In other words, I'm telling people, don't just focus on the big companies. Look at a little bit at these mid tiers, because that's where a lot of this excitement is going to be. Now, Tombill happens to be right next door. I'll show you the map here in a minute. It happens to be right next door to Premier Gold's Hard Rock deposit in Ontario. Well, Premier was just purchased by Equinox. Okay, so this is one of those exciting stories that's kind of emerging. And this gold camp all of a sudden is going to become one of the most, you know, exciting focal points for the next generation of gold mining in the Canadian Shield. Okay, so this is a great opportunity. We're getting in an early stage. Just so everybody knows, we purchased our shares on the market. We were not part of the initial placements, anything like that. We actually went out and managed to find, I believe, you know, a large shareholding. I don't know exactly what it was, but a large number of shares in the market, and we now have
about 5% of the company today.
Okay, all right. You guys are in charge of that department. Okay, well, that's good. It gives us a nice position within an emerging, very exciting emerging story. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, now this project, like I said, in the private hands, it came into, we'll call it a capital shell. I think it was called Blue Rock Capital, something like this. And that deal was consummated early December and began trading. You can see here there are a fair number of shares out. I think, you know, basically to get a high quality asset like this, they had to issue quite a bit of percentage and a number of shares to the owners of Tombill, the Tombill project. But you know what? In this case, this makes a lot of business sense. So you can see it's got a fair bit of cash, about a little less than $6.5 million in the bank, and that is going to be allocated to their upcoming drill program, which is going to start imminently here. But you know, right now their market capitalization, it's modest. You know, there's some people that know the story. There's definitely some big players involved here. Market cap is what I call modest, you know, compared to a lot of explorers, especially ones that have, you know, such a clear high potential as Tombill. So that we're, you know, hovering around 30 million Canadian. What is that? About 24 million US. Look, in a bull gold market, gold like this probably worth, you know, well, north of $100 an ounce in the ground in resource level. So we'll talk about that upside here in a minute. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, we are near Geraldton, which is in Ontario. It's just north of Lake Superior. Thunder Bay is a short ways to the southwest there. This is part of the Canadian Shield. This is classic granite greenstone terrain. In this case, we're looking at a greenstone, but this deposit actually is hosted by a particular lithology within the greenstone. Makes an exquisite gold deposit style that I just love, these what we call iron formation hosted gold systems. Go to the next slide, please. All right, you can see here the land position that was acquired as part of this transaction, the Tombill Mines group there in gray. Those are the tenements that were in the private company for many, many years. I remember looking at the Hard Rock project, which is the area in green and is designated with that red arrow. I remember looking at this way back in 2011 and 12. You know, they were drilling away, coming up with bigger and bigger and bigger resources, and they were also seeing the deposit go down plunge to the west. And I remember seeing, oh well, I guess it's going to be cut off because there's a private group that owns that. Didn't have any clarity back then about who owned the project or whatever, but obviously the folks waited patiently, and now this story, you know, has emerged, like I said, and together in a holistic picture here. You're talking about a major gold district. You know, the resources, reserves, resources, as well as the mine inventory over in the Hard Rock side, as we'll see here in a minute, is over 10 million ounces. So you can look at the Tombill ground, which is immediately adjacent, and basically the continuation. It should have a lot of potential. Okay, so go to the next slide, please. Okay, I'd like to talk a little about geology, kind of build the framework for what this system is. In this case, this is a diagram I've used before. It shows various settings for what we call orogenic gold deposits. These are deposits that are derived when fluids that are, you know, generated through metamorphism deep in the ground work their way up, you know, mainly along structures. They carry gold with them. They can form different types of deposits. You can get, for example, strata-bound replacement deposits, as you see on the left. You can get quartz reefs, as you see in the middle. But you can also get structures that come up and actually focus the fluids right along a fold hinge within the lithologies. Okay, so a fold hinge is basically where the layers of rock have been folded up like an inverted taco. And the fluids, they find their way into that zone of weakness, and they end up depositing gold in little structures that crisscross that fold hinge, basically the axis of the fold. And this is a case of that type of deposit. In this case, the rock, the lithology that hosts the gold is what we call an iron formation. It's sedimentary rocks deposited in an ocean environment eons and eons ago. And they're rich in iron. Okay, back in the Archean, there was a lot of iron in seawater. In some places, that iron would precipitate out, form these layers of very rich, iron-rich sediments. And then, as those things got squeezed and deformed and metamorphosed, they become the site of these wonderful gold deposits, which can be very big, very long, you know, predictable down plunge. Remember that the geology that you're seeing here in cross-section goes in and out of the cross-section. Okay, this fold, that geometry will go in and out of that picture, and it can carry on for kilometers in some cases. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to show you an example of just that. Now, this is a plan map, a geologic map of the Musselwhite deposit, also in Ontario, and it's actually not too far away. I mean, you know, in the big picture, it's north of Geraldton. You know, it's probably a 2-hour flight or something, you know, by small plane. But Musselwhite is in the same geologic terrain. It's basically a perfect example of what we're dealing with here. And what you're seeing here is a plan map that shows folded rocks, and in particular, you've got that silicate iron formation shown in blue. That is kind of the focal point of where the gold was deposited. The little red lines that you see are basically, you know, the gold deposits that have formed, and where they formed is right along those fold axes. You know, sometimes it's in the places where it swoops down, sometimes it's in the places where it swoops up, but basically the fluids have found their way into those fold axes, and they've deposited gold in little structures in that regime. Okay, now those fold axes project down into the ground, and they go down for literally thousands of meters. They keep going and going and going. So Musselwhite is a massive gold deposit. Newmont owns it, of course, now because they took over Goldcorp. And, Musselwhite is one of those mines where, it's not like, a lot of people don't even know much about Musselwhite. It's kind of one of those that's kind of operating in the background. But boy, talk about a deposit that just goes and goes and goes and goes. I worked for Homestake Mining early in my career, which had the Homestake mine in South Dakota. That is the granddaddy of iron formation hosted gold systems. From where it started at surface, they were mining down over 10,000 feet when Barrick basically decided to close the doors after they took over Homestake in the low gold price. It's a shame it had to close the doors because they still had like 5 million ounces of reserves left when they shut the doors. But it just shows that these deposits go and go and go along these fold axes. Wonderful things. Go ahead to the next slide. I like to show some rock pictures. I got 2 rock pictures just so people can see what we're dealing with. Okay. This is actually from the hard rock deposit. Hard rock deposit was mined, partially mined underground. So there were, I think this is the F zone. There were ore bodies that were mined underground historically over a few decades. This is a picture from underground. What you're seeing here, you can see a little hammer, a rock hammer that's at horizontal there. About in the middle of the photo, but we're looking at folded iron formation. Okay, you can see the little traces of the quartz veining, the white stuff, show whip folding. Just up and down and up and down. Okay, this is an area along a bigger fold axis. So these fold axes that I'm talking about are big scale features. But as you get inside the rock and you can see it close up, you'll see that there's ever smaller and smaller fractal versions of that. Within the mine face, for example. Okay, so in that photograph, you're looking at intensely folded rocks, and the quartz veining and stuff is a product of all those fluids getting focused into that area and depositing gold. Okay, so this is beautiful looking stuff. Anybody that knows iron formation deposits, they get very excited about that kind of stuff. Okay, go to the next slide. Here's a picture in core. Okay, so this is a split diamond core. You can see here the pen is sitting on some folded. See how it's wavy, the little wavy bands in the iron formation, which is a dark gray, dark black almost color here. And then you can see these quartz veins, quartz and sulfide. The gold is usually associated with the quartz and the sulfide because it was brought in by those later fluids. But those intensely folded rocks, the iron formation that hosts it, are clearly evident in this. So this is the kind of thing you're going to expect to see as Tombill drills. Okay, so as they drill, perhaps they announce a news release or something, they show some photos. This is what you would expect to see. All right, go to the next slide. You guys ever have a question, jump in. Okay, otherwise I'll keep rambling. All right, these 2 images show basically the same thing. They're the top is a 3-dimensional model, a computer model of the hard rock deposit. The kind of conical gray shaded thing, that's the planned or projected open pit. Now that Equinox has bought Premier, they own 50%. I believe Orion recently purchased the other 50%. So there's going to be a joint venture operation here, but it's like a 5.5 million ounce reserve within that open pit. Grades about, I think, 1.3 grams. So they're going to mine it in bulk. So it means, a bit lower grade than the higher grade that you would expect underground, but still it's a great deposit. Will make a great mine. What I'm interested in is what's coming out of that pit and projecting down at depth. Okay. So you have multiple fold hinges or loci for these lodes shown in purple, kind of a yellowish color and a green color. And there's other colors buried in there too. But basically those are the quartz vein rich fold axes in the iron formation, and they're plunging westward. Okay, so they're what that means is they're getting deeper and deeper and deeper as you go westward. Notice that there's a drill hole mentioned right at the left-hand margin of the image. Hit 18.5 grams per ton gold over 20.5 meters. Wow. that's as good or better than a lot of the news coming out of exciting stories like Great Bear, for example. So yes, there is definitely potential for high grade in here. The holes, it's not to say that the other lodes don't have that potential too. It's just in that particular hole, it hit that zone. And
Quinton, just to clarify, is this on the Premier property or on the Tombill property?
Good point. Okay, let's go back to the image. So you can see that we're literally right on the fence line. Okay, in the top image, the property boundary is not shown, but that's why I put the bottom one in, because that dash line, that vertical dash line, shows you that the Tombill property is immediately adjacent. Okay, when you hit 18.5 gram over 20.5 meters, doesn't take a lot of brain cells to say, maybe that might continue over to the left. Okay, look, it is getting deeper. That's part of the story here. It's going to take some deeper drilling, but the geology is compelling. Iron formation gold, yep, it goes and goes and goes and goes. Like I told you, Musselwhite, massive deposit, just keeps on going. Every time they drill holes down plunge, they find more and more. The same geology is here, and I think this will be a very similar story. What's also exciting about this story, the team that they have in place to explore at Tombill are basically the guys who drilled Hard Rock. Okay, so the guy Tim, the head, I believe, vice president of exploration, he provided me some of the images, like the rock images and so forth. So you've got, again, the A team working on an A grade deposit here, who will make discovery. They know how to drill deep holes, do wedges, like all the technical aspects are taken care of here. So it's a very comforting story. All right.
If they go deeper, do they tend to go a little narrower too?
What's that?
Yeah, as they go deeper, do they also tend to become a little more narrow too?
No. These things, they should be very predictable. Look at how consistent. I mean, it is a bit blobby, just like the outline. A lot of that's just a function of drilling. How much drilling there is at any given spot. Okay, but these things just go and go and go. They're the Energizer Bunny of gold. Okay, when you're in an iron formation hosted gold system, these things can go 4 kilometers. And in Tombill is right next door. They have several kilometers strike to work with. Right, so I'll show you that in a minute.
Cool.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so what are we doing drill-wise? Well, now we're looking straight down on the property. The gray outline is the Tombill asset, the property. You can see we're looking straight down. So it's a plan view of the lodes and the projection of the lodes that cut across the property. Hard Rock is immediately to the right there. You can see the reference to the 18.5 gram over 20.5 meters. It's literally sitting right next to the property boundary. Now the brown, purple, green, etc. Lodes there. Those are those sheet-like lodes that are following the fold axis, and they come straight onto Tombill's property here. And then the red dots with lines coming out, those are the planned drill holes. So basically, these guys are going to pick up where they left off over on the Hard Rock side. They're going to jump over here now, and they're going to start drilling this thing off, just like they did over at Hard Rock. They're going to start drilling holes and on, evenly spaced intervals, I believe. Look, because this is such a predictable system, you don't have to drill it, on 10-meter centers or something. You can drill on like 100 or 200-meter centers. Okay, so they're going to be aggressively drilling this thing down plunge. They're going to start with the 6.5 million they have right now. Will it get all of the holes shown on this map? Heck no. It's going to take a lot more money and stuff. But I will tell you, with the drilling they're doing, the initial drill holes should give us a very clear indication of whether the system's here. Who knows? It might be getting higher grade. One of the things that intrigues me is this structure that goes across the property. It shows displacement of the units. Okay, so there's what we call right lateral displacement. As you step across the fault, stuff is shifted to the right. But you know what? I've had one experience where as you go down plunge, the deposit got better. And we know that, that's Fosterville. So, there's always a chance that you have some pleasant surprise like that too as you approach one of the major structures, which might have been a conduit for fluid. Okay, I'm not saying I know that for a case here, but it could be that things actually get wider and bigger as you go down. Yeah, I don't know. All right, but it's sure as heck worth testing. All right, and I guess at the bare minimum, it's very easy to see that this deposit should continue. So what I've done in the lower left there is I've shown with dashed line the continuation of the down plunge extension of the hard rock deposit. And I've put little red polka dots there to just show how they're going to have to drill this thing, you know, in fences. And each hole they put down, yes, they're deep. Okay, so the best way to get more value out of each hole is to wedge. You put a little steel wedge in the hole, kick the drill bit out, and you give another go at it. So you can get actually 2 or 3 or 4 drill piercements with any given drill hole. So you have a mother hole, you drill that, you pull back a few hundred meters, set a wedge, and give another poke at it. That way you get more pokes at the target from one drill hole. All righty. Before we jump, though, let's go back there for just a second, Max. Notice the ounces that we're talking about here. Okay, there's 5.5 million ounces of reserve in the pits. There have been about 2.1 million ounces produced, so there is underground development. A lot of the focus here was underground, and just on certain loads. Okay, so not all the loads, but certain loads. But there's a roughly 3 million ounces, I believe, of inferred underground. So we'll call it high grade underground material that's been drilled here. It's not been drilled, extensively yet to get it up to indicated and measured. But I guarantee you, this deposit will be one of these things that keeps on going and going and going. Well, guess what? If these guys find another 5 million ounces, say next door to Hard Rock, it's a pretty, it's a foregone conclusion that the whole thing should be mined as a unit, not as 2 separate mines. But that's the prize here. Find 5 million ounces, that should be worth something. All right. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. A little more about the rest of the property, though. Look, the targets that I just talked about, or we kind of let in with, are the main focus of the company. But and they're effectively located, kind of where that says East Porphyry Zone, up to Central Porphyry Zone. Like that's the main target area. But they do have other targets on the property. It's not as if that's the only focus here. Now, one of the areas that intrigued me, where it says North Porphyry target there. A little bit to the right and below that oval is a squiggle, purple squiggles. Well, guess what? Those are fold axes. If there's iron formation caught up in those fold axes, guess what? You could easily have multiple loads forming here. Okay, remember what I showed at Musselwhite. It is not just one set of loads. At Musselwhite, you have multiple, the fold hinges that are all mineralized and host ore bodies. Okay, so my bet is if these guys get out there, start drilling some holes, I think they're going to find more of these ore bodies. Yeah, so even more upside.
Quinton and Max, I think if you go back to the slide, let's see here, the Musselwhite slide, which I think is slide number 6. Using that as an analog, where do you think? Can you go back to the 6 there? There you go. Yeah. There you go. Where do you think we are in terms of right now? In that chart right there in that picture.
Okay, if I use this as a direct analog, for example, let's say the PQD area there. Let's say that represents a hard rock deposit. Okay, those red lines above the Q are plunging into the ground. All right, and that's what the profile of hard rock looks like. Okay, so everything I talked about would be like that. But notice that to the west and then even up to the upper right there are other fold areas where you see other loads. Okay, so you got the TAN off to the west. You got a smaller load up there in the anticline, the upper left from PQD, and then up there at Esker and so forth, you got even more loads. Okay, so what I am trying to tell people is that while everybody's focused on the known, the known being the hard rock deposit and that particular fold axis, there is equally good potential to find additional lodes in this time environment. When you get into folded iron formations, you focus on those axes, and with luck, they deliver.
Cool. Sorry, didn't mean to.
No, that's a good question. That's a great question. That helps me, emphasize my point, is that these are big gold deposits. At Homestake, guys, the big fish there, the main ledge, the main lode, which was basically a fold axis, produced, I believe, 1 million ounces vertical, or for every 100 feet vertically, for the first 30 million ounces, and it kept going. But there were other lodes around it too. There was different ledges found on either side. It ended up being a massive deposit, produced 42 million ounces over life of mine, and it had 5 million ounces when it closed the door. So these things are huge systems.
So being somewhat predictable of a gold system as it goes deeper, does it get more mineralized as it goes deeper, or no? How's that?
Depends on what depth the thing formed at. There are some processes. This isn't just talking to iron formation hosted gold systems, but there are two processes I'm aware of that can produce very high grades, or two regimes. Okay, one of them is like Fosterville. When you're up in the epizonal regime, newfound gold is another example of that style. Okay, when you're up in that regime, you can get very high bonanza grades in orogenic systems. And then the other place you get it is kind of down in the deeper part of the system, where you transition from what we call amphibolite metamorphism to upper green schist metamorphism. There's often a boundary through that regime where, for whatever reason, like probably just fluid flow or fluid focus, you can get super bonanza grade, like the Red Lake mine. Okay. Whether that's true here, I can't say, I don't, but I can tell you 18.5 gram over 20 meters, that's worth taking note. Okay. There's something going on down there.